Morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. There are only seven people here. Yeah, 10. So we'll start. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But before we come to this particular slide, which looks very complicated and complex, okay, we have left one problem here. Okay, we will have to complete that particular problem. Okay. And is Rashmi there? I think she had a problem when we started discussing this particular problem. I'll just make a blank slide so that I can explain to you this problem. Right. So I'll just go back. So this is a problem. This is a problem on bond immunization. Okay. And we were supposed to discuss this concept of bond immunization, which was left halfway because of the time restriction that we have. Okay. So what we'll do is we will start our discussion again today. Give me a minute. Just give me a minute. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Okay. So basically, this problem was on bond immunization that we discussed last time. Okay. So this is where we had stopped. Okay. And I had to tell you how do we calculate the immunization strategy. So I explained to you that the first step, whenever we calculate immunization, the first step is definitely you have to calculate the duration of the two bonds. So we have duration of bond A and we have the duration of bond B. This is B. Duration of bond. Okay, sorry, I'll just clear off this. Step number one, we have to calculate duration of bond A and we have to calculate duration of bond B, right? This is the first step that we have to understand. I hope you know this.
Yes, sir.
Again, I will ask you to read this particular problem. Please read this particular problem. Okay. It says there is Mr. A who wants to invest around 50,000. The money is required after 2 years for his daughter's education. He has two types of bonds. Bond A, okay, which carries a 7% coupon rate, which has 4 years to mature, and required rate of return is 10%, right? And the current price of the bond is 904.9. Next is the data is available for bond B. Okay, time duration is 1 year, coupon rate 6%, required rate of return in both the cases is same, so there is no change as far as required rate of return is concerned. Okay, and the market price is 936. No, sorry, 963. So we are required to calculate the bond immunization strategy in such case. Now, whenever the question comes on calculation of bond immunization strategy, we always are going to use the formula. We are always going to use. Sorry, we are going to use the formula. We are going to use the formula X1, which talks about the proportion of investment. X1 into D1, that's duration of the first bond, plus X2 into D2 is equal to 2. The other day, people asked me if there are three bonds. If there are three bonds, this formula will not work. Okay, or even if it works, it involves a complicated maths, right? So whether there are three bonds or four bonds, we'll see it later. But as of now, we will solve only with two bonds. So this is a formula that I'm going to use. And when I want to use this particular formula, the first part is I have to calculate the duration of each of the bonds. So I will calculate the duration of bond A using the formula, and I will calculate the duration of bond B. I further also told you that whenever the time to maturity of a particular bond is 1 year, in such case, the duration will always be equal to 1. Remember, I told you this. Whenever we calculate the duration, okay, if we want to calculate the duration, the first point that we have to take into consideration is the time of the bond, the time to maturity of the bond. So if the time to maturity of the bond is equal to 1, then in such case, the duration for such bonds will always be equal to 1. The duration of the bond will always be equal to 1. But if the time to maturity of the bond is greater than 1, I repeat, if the time to maturity of the bond is greater than 1, then duration you have to calculate. You need to calculate the duration. Okay, so you are going to calculate the duration. So in my case, bond A is greater than 1 year time to maturity. So I have to calculate the duration for bond A. And bond B, there is no need for me to calculate the duration because the time to maturity is 1, and therefore the duration of such bonds will always be equal to 1. So that is my first step. First step is calculate the duration of bond A and bond B. I did mention to you in the last class that I will give you the answer for bond A. The duration for bond A is 3.6. The duration of the bond A is 3.6, and duration for bond B is 1. So if I have these values, what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute these values in the equation. So that is my step number 2. So my step number 2 is I have to write down the equation x1 into d1. So in my case, it will not be x1, it will be xa because I have bond A and duration of bond A. Okay, and here I have xb, that is proportion of investment in bond B into the duration of bond B. Okay, since I have two bonds, I will equate it to 2. Clear? Now I'm going to substitute this. So the moment I substitute, I get 3xa, okay, plus is equal to 2. So this is the equation that I'm going to get. Now the problem arose in the last class when I started substituting the values for xa and xb. Clear? I think Rashmi, is Rashmi there? Is Rashmi
Yes,
there?
sir.
I think Rashmi, the doubt is cleared, or still there is a doubt? In my last class I did mention, I wrote something like this. Whatever I've written in the last class, that is what I'm going to write on. I said let x1 is equal to 1 minus x2. Sorry, x2 is equal to 1 minus x1. This is what I've written. This is what I wrote in the last class. So in this particular class, what I'm going to write, I'm going to write xb, that is proportion of investment in bond B, is equal to 1 minus xa. This is what I'm going to write. It is same as the first one equation. There's no change in that. Now the question arise last time is why 1? Why is it 1? Proportion always, I just searched something. Proportions are always written in percentage basis or on decimal basis. Proportion are always on percentage basis or decimal places. So if it is percentage, I have to write 100 here. If it is in decimal, it becomes one whole decimal. Okay, it becomes a complete integer. That's the reason I have to write here as 1. That is the only explanation available wherever we go. The same explanation. It says whenever you are calculating proportions are always expressed under two heads. Either they are expressed in percentage basis or they are expressed in point basis, that is decimal basis. Right? So if you want to take on decimal basis, because it is easy for calculation, it does not involve huge numbers, that the sum of all proportions will always be equal to 1. The sum of all proportions will always be equal to 1. So if we want to calculate a proportion which is unknown, we have to substitute the value of the unknown in some other variable, and this is the equation that we get. Clear? So in my case here, I will write down let xb is equal to 1 minus xa. Right? So if I write down this particular equation, my new equation turns out to be 3.6 xa plus 1 minus xa, okay, into 1 is equal to 2. So this is how my equation is going to turn out, right? So if I solve this particular equation, what do I get? I get 2xa is equal to 2 minus 1, which goes on the other hand. So my equation becomes xa is equal to 1 by 2.6. So if you solve this xa, okay, you get something. Xa is equal to, if I'm not wrong, you get somewhere around 38, 26, 10 by 30, yeah, 38. You get somewhere around 38.4% as a proportion of investment in bond A. And sorry, I'll write it here. It is not accepting here. XB, how do you calculate XB? Substitute the value of XA here in this particular equation. Okay, when you substitute the value of XA in this particular equation, so now it becomes, okay, why it becomes 1 minus, this is not 38.4, you have to write it as 0.38. Okay, you have to write it as 0.38. So if you substitute the value here, you get 61.5. Okay, now until this point, any doubts please, because this is where we stopped and we did not go further because the understanding that equation was becoming difficult. Any doubts up to this particular point, please? Rashmi, are you convinced?
No.
Rashmi, are you
Yes, sir.
convinced that, we are talking about proportions? And I think in statistics also, whenever you talk about proportions, it is always mentioned in percentage basis or decimal basis. So I checked the statistics book itself to get this answer, and that is the conclusion that I have got, that proportions are always expressed either in decimal places or on percentage basis. And if we use either of them, we will get this particular answer.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So anyone has any other doubts, please? Any
Sir,
doubts? Yeah.
hello, sir.
Yes, Priyanka.
Sir, in bond A, time is 4 years.
Yes.
Then why we have to calculate duration 8 years?
Why have you to calculate duration for?
8 years.
Where is 8 years?
Then you have written here 8, no sir.
Where?
DA.
That is D, not D8. It is DB. Duration of the bond B. Is it looking like 8?
Yes sir. No sir, here DA is equals to 8 is here.
Where?
In last class also you have said to calculate 8 years.
8 years? Now, where can you see D8? Which line on this particular slide do you see D8?
Here one you have written DA, no sir here.
First one.
Yes sir, first line.
See, this is not 8. This is, sorry, don't worry about this. This is cancelled. There was a mistake here. That is the reason I cancelled it. Look from this point. It is duration
Okay
of
sir.
bond A and this is duration of bond B.
Then we have to calculate 4 years only sir.
Yeah, you have to calculate duration for bond A on for 4 years on 4 years basis only.
Okay sir.
Okay.
Okay sir.
Yeah. I think you got confused with this. This is cancelled.
Okay sir. Thank you sir.
Anything else? Okay. Now, if you are done with this, we'll go to step number 3. Now, please pay attention. Step number 3 is very important. We have calculated the duration of the two bonds. We have calculated the percentage of both the bonds. Now we have to go for the next level. That is step number 3. Step number 3, what we have to do is, see, understand, this particular person, how much money does he require? He requires 50,000, right? This person requires 50,000. When does he require? When does he require? After 2 years. Clear? That is what the problem says, right? I'll just take you back to the problem. What it says, okay, he has 50,000 to invest. The money is required after 2 years. So he needs 50,000. He needs 50,000 after 2 years. Right now, he does not require 50,000. Do you get this particular point? Right now, he does not require 50,000. He wants this particular money after 2 years. So if he wants 50,000 after 2 years, what is the present value of this 50,000 today? So we have to find out the present value of 50,000. Okay, that is step number 3. So the present value of investment, is equal to, okay, it is 50,000 divided by 1 plus r raised to n. I think this is the present value formula that you have studied. If you have not studied this way, either you have studied in this particular way. 1 divided by 1 plus r raised to n into the amount, whatever amount is mentioned here. I think this is what you might have learned. This is what Prag sir might have told you or taught you how to
Yes, sir.
calculate present value. So only thing is, since it is 1, I have directly multiplied 1 into amount. My amount is 50,000, and accordingly I will be able to find out my present value. So now, how to find the present value? 50,000 will remain as it is. The whole divided by, what is your required rate of return in the problem? Required rate of return is 10%, right? Required rate of return is 10%. And when do you want this money? When do you want this money? You want this money after 2 years. So we'll keep it n as 2. Okay. Now if I solve this, I get 50,000, the whole divided by 1.10 raised to 2. Okay. So when you solve this, how much is what is the answer that you get? If I'm not wrong, you get somewhere around 41,000. Just calculate this.
Yes, sir. 41,322.
41,320.
322, sir. 322.31.
322. We'll keep this value. So what is this? This is the present value of 50,000. And when do we require this 50,000? After 2 years. So after 2 years of investment, you should give that particular person 50,000 rupees. And the present value of that 50,000 today is 41,332 rupees. Getting it? Any doubts here? Okay, now step number 4. Step number 4 talks about how much money we have to invest now based on the present. We have to assume that this is the amount that we have. We have to assume that we have only 41,000. Now, how much money has to go into bond A and how much money has to go into bond B? So we have got the proportions. Okay, so for proportion of bond A, please understand this is not probability, this is proportion. Proportion of money in bond A is equal to 41,322 into what is the proportion of money in bond A? I think it is 38%. 38% that we calculated, 38.4% of money has to go in bond A, and proportion of investment in bond B is equal to 41,322 into 61.5. Now, for all those of you who are not able to understand this step, from where did I get this 38.4 and 61.5 is basically from the previous slide. Remember, we had calculated the proportions. We had calculated proportions from the previous slide, XA, and here we had calculated proportion of XB. So using these proportions, I'm going to decide how much money has to go into bond A and how much money has to go into bond B. Can somebody please calculate this and tell me how much of money has to be invested in bond A and how much money has to be invested in bond B?
So in bond A, 15,867.6.
15,000.
867.
867. Okay. And how much money has to go into bond B?
And in
How much?
25,413.
413. So this is the amount of money that has to go into bond B. Clear? So this is the proportion of investment in bond A and this is the proportion of investment in bond B. Now, if this is the proportion of investment in bond A and bond B, okay, last step is how many bonds should we buy then? If this is the proportion of investment, if this is the proportion of this much money has to go into bond A and this much money has to go into bond B, then how many bonds should we buy? So that is step number 4. So step number 4 talks about number of bonds to be purchased. Number of bonds to be purchased. So we'll see how many bonds we have to purchase. Okay. How much money we have to invest in bond A? So bond A is equal to, okay, how much money you are going to invest in bond A? 15,867. Okay, 15,867. And in bond B, how much money we are going to invest? We are going to invest 25,413. Now, how many bonds should we buy? So if we have the money, okay, if we have the money available, the total money that we are going to invest in bond A, we know that. Total money that we are going to invest in bond B, we know that. How many number of bonds should we buy? Now, if you want to know how many number of bonds you should buy, you should divide this value by the price of the bond. What is the price of the bond given to you in the problem? Market price of the bond A is 904 and market price of bond B is 963, right? So with using these two values, we are going to divide that. That will give us the number of bonds. So bond A, our total investment in bond A is going to be 15,867 divided by, okay, the market price of the bond market price of bond A, that is 904. I hope it is 904. I'll just check it. Yeah, it is 904.9. So 904.9. Just make it do one thing. Just make this 905, because 904.9 is almost 905. So if you divide this, you will get how many number of bonds you should purchase. And here you have to divide it by 963. So that is the number of bonds that you will get. Just check the answers. Just divide this.
So this bond is 17.53.
Bond A is
17.53.
17.53. Now you cannot have 17.53 bonds.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How many you will have? You will have 18.
18.
Okay. Next one.
This 26.38.
26.38.
38.
Okay. 3 or 38. What is it?
38, sir. 38.
38. So we cannot have 26.38 bonds. We can have only 26 bonds. Right? This is where your problem gets complete. This is where the problem gets complete. So remember, what did we do? I'll just summarize. We started with the first step number 1, that is calculation of duration of both the bonds. Okay, I gave you the answer, but you'll have to actually calculate the answers. Next, we found out the proportions. We came to know what are the proportions of money that has to go into bond A and proportion of money that has to go into bond B. Then we found out the present value of our investment. The present value of our investment was 41,000 rupees. This is what we found out, the present value of our investment. Using this present value of investment, we found out how much money has to go into bond A and how much money has to go into bond B. So we came to know that 15,867 has to go into bond A and 25,413 has to go into bond B, right? Now, once we know how much of money is going to bond A and bond B, then we found out the number of bonds that had to be purchased. So we have to purchase 18 bonds of bond A and we have to purchase 26 bonds of bond B. When we make this particular proportion, only then at the end of 2 years, we will achieve 50,000 and we'll hand over to this money to the concerned person who is going to use this money for his daughter's education. So this is where the problem gets completed. And this is also where bond valuation also gets completed. Clear? So this is also the end of bond valuation. Clear? Yeah. Any doubts here up to this particular point? So remember, we solved problems on pricing. We solved problems on yield to maturity. We solved problems using yield to maturity to compute duration. We used duration and then we found out bond immunization strategies. So all these things are interlinked. So first you need to know how to calculate the price. Next you need to know how to calculate the yield. Next you need to know how to calculate the duration. And last one is you should know how to calculate the bond immunization strategies. So these are the 4 important parts or 4 important methods of asserting the value of the bond. And that's the reason it is called bond valuation techniques. Clear? Any doubts up to this particular point? Please tell me, otherwise we'll proceed.
So can you please show the first slide of answer, sir?
First slide of the problem or the first slide of the...
So both, just a sec.
This problem do you want?
I said the solution also, the first page.
See, Rashmi, solution, you
Yes,
don't
sir.
worry. I will solve this on a piece of paper, okay, and I will click a photograph and then I'll send it to you. But how did I arrive at the solution? You are trying to understand that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will solve this on a piece of paper. I will take a photograph of it and I will send it to you. Okay, don't worry as of now, because if you look at this slide, it is too messy. You will not be able to clearly find get the solution by looking at the slide, because there are too many things. See, I'm using a marker pen. Okay, here my handwriting differs from what I actually have to write. I want to write at the seconds. I want to write somewhere here. Okay, I want to write actually somewhere here, but the pen points somewhere here. So it is becoming difficult for me to put everything in line. Understand the concept only in this particular slide. When it comes to giving you the solution for this particular problem, I will solve it on a regular sheet of paper, white paper. I will click a photograph of it and then I will send it to you. Clear? Understand the concept here. That's it.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else has any other problem? Okay. So when we are done with this concept of equity valuation, so we are done with this concept of bond valuation, right? Now we have to come to the equity valuation. Clear? Now, please understand one thing. Don't look at the formula and get panicked. If I explain to you the formula is actually very, very easy to remember. But of course, it requires practice. Just by looking at the formula, you will not be able to understand it. Okay. Now, before I come to this particular formula, I want to tell you something, and that is, see, it is very easy for us to find out the price of the equity share. It is very easy for us to find the price of an equity share when we know, when we have purchased it, when we are going to sell it. So we know the buying date and when we know the selling date. Okay. So depending on what is the buying rate and selling rate, we can come to know how much of a return we are going to expect from this particular equity. But suppose, and this method is used, I think you have used this particular method called as ending price of a bond, ending price minus beginning price, the whole divided by beginning price. I think you have used this particular formula. Okay, has anyone not used this particular formula? If your answer is no, I have not used this particular formula, that means you have not done your assignment. Clear? When I asked you to calculate the return, you did ending price minus beginning price, the whole divided by beginning price, right? So use this particular formula to find out what is the return. Now this formula is applicable, or it holds good only when you are holding the share for 1 year. When you are holding the share, when you have bought the share today and within 1 year you want to sell that particular share, in such case, using this particular formula or using this particular concept, it is easy to find out what is the return. But suppose if you are holding that particular share for more than 1 year, okay, let me give you an example. You are holding a share, okay, 1 year it gives a loss, 1 year the share has a loss, second year the share has a profit, third year the share has a no profit, no loss. Now, if I ask you to calculate, tell me what is the return that you're going to expect. It is very difficult because 1 year you have a loss, second year you have a profit, third year again you don't have neither a profit nor a loss. In such case, it is becoming very difficult for any common person to understand or to estimate how to calculate the return for the share. If such a situation arises, we cannot use this particular formula. This formula will not hold good. In such case, when we are holding the share for more than a year, we always have to use a concept called as multiple year holding formula. If you are holding a share for more than 1 year, you have to always use multiple year holding formula. Okay. And this is the formula that we have to understand for multiple year holding period. In this class, please just note down this particular formula. In my next class, I will explain to you how do you arrive at this particular formula. Okay, I'm not going to show you the derivation. That is not important for us. We are going to make use of this particular formula to find out the price of the equity share. Is that clear? So what you do is, you as of now, you just take down these two formulas. You take down multiple year holding period formula, and you just take down the no, don't take two stage, just take down this formula. Just take down this formula, that's more than sufficient. I'll explain to you the remaining part in the next class. Okay, please take down the formula and take it down very, very cautiously. Okay, this is E0, this is E naught, by the way. It actually has to be written in this particular way. E naught, this is not E0, and here also this is E not. Okay, it has to come below, not here. Just make a note here. That's it. Write down the formula. I'll explain to you the formula in the next class. Note down the brackets properly. Note down the notations that have been mentioned. Okay, somewhere it is small n. Please note this. Somewhere here it is small n. Somewhere it is capital N. Okay, these are not same. They are something different. So please note that and write it down properly so that you will not be confused. Here it is 1 plus g raised to n. Here it is 1 plus g raised to capital N plus 1. So please note this. Both are not same. Okay, this n and this n is not same. Okay. Yeah, have you noted down the formula? Have you,
Yes, sir.
yeah, have you written down the formula,
Yes, sir,
Rashmi?
done. Yes, sir.
Please write it down clearly. A small mistake in the formula is going to cost you straight 10 marks. Straight. Each problem can come for 10 marks. There will be a problem on multiple year holding period. You can expect the problem for 10 marks. If this doesn't come, two-stage model will definitely come for 10 marks. Sorry, not 20, 10 marks. If not two-stage model, then there is something called as three-stage model that will come for 10 marks. So one problem is sure from this. Okay, so I'm running out of time now. I'll stop here. I hope you have written down the formula. We have 28 people who have attended the class. Okay, I want everyone to come in the video mode, please. Yeah. Fine. So in my next class, there are 28 here. Now there are only 25. I don't know who has left. Please don't blame me afterwards. Okay. So I'll continue my tax class as it is. We are going to solve problems on